Hello, hello! Welcome to your Playful Pollinators videos. We are going to be painting the butterfly painting in this video. I am so excited. This one is just so cute. So as I'm preparing my paints, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to work on in this painting. So as you can see, there's a lot of black here on the page, and what I'm really excited about is that means we get to play with the details of the coloring in these butterflies. And so we're going to talk about water barriers, we're going to talk about color mixing, and we're going to really explore the wet in wet technique in watercolor. So let's just get into it. All right. Got my handy dandy color chart, my water. I like to have a paper towel, and I've got my little cloth here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start with my larger brush, and we are going to be mixing up some cool orange colors for these butterflies. So I'm going to grab some of my orange, but cool as in nifty, I guess, not cool as in cool colors. It's going to be a nice warm orange. So I'm adding a little bit of my permanent orange and my Winsor red. I think I want a little bit of this transparent yellow. That's going to warm that orange up. Oh yes, so nice. So I'm mixing up a big paint puddle, because we're going to be, I guess I'm going to mix up a really big paint puddle because we are going to be using a lot of this. So you really want this paint in your paint puddle to be nice and swirly. You see how it's really just, you got a lot there. And you can just keep tweaking it until you have the color that you want. And when you are painting in watercolor, the area that you cover with moisture, so whether it's just water or watery paint, that area, you're going to be able to manipulate that color in that area as long as the paint is wet. And that's what we call the water barrier. So as we're painting this butterfly, the cool thing is you can kind of just go over the whole thing. I know that the dots around the edges are usually white, so you can paint over the whole butterfly shape, or you can leave some of the little dots white. For easy's sake, I'm just gonna paint over the whole thing. I've got my nice big mixture. Remember, you don't need a ton of paint on your brush. I'm doing mostly water, and then I'm gonna drop some paint in. Oh, that's so pretty. So I'm leaving some of the dots around the edges just white, but I'm mostly painting this whole thing. We're not going for perfect realism here, you know. And I know there's going to be some yellow, so I'm going to actually just take some of my transparent yellow and just kind of drop it in here. And then I might take a little bit of this darker color and add a little bit of that, wet and wet. So by adding these colors in while this is wet, we're going to get this really beautiful blending of the colors that are on our page. And I love this technique. I think it's so fun to see the colors swirl. I think it's really fun with this outline too, because then you can just focus on the wet and wet, and you know it's still going to look like a butterfly, so you can really play around with what's happening on the page. Okay, and I'm just adding in some little drops around the wings where I think it might be a little bit darker. And you don't need a ton of water on here. It can be just enough so it's going to stay wet so we can play with it for a little while, but it doesn't need to be super, super damp. If you find that the water's kind of piling up or you want it to be a little bit drier in some areas, you can always take your brush and just scoop up some of that water, almost like a sponge. Just lift it up off your page. And I almost want to add in some of this quinacridone pink, just for like a little little bit right here, just because I kind of want to see that flare in there next to the body of our butterfly. Yee, so fun. All right, I think I'm gonna kind of work my way around this. If I have any lefties here, you can start in the upper right-hand corner and work your way down to the bottom left. So I might do this little one up top here. Meep, meep, meep. So cute, just a couple dots. That'll do it. It'll give the illusion of color and you don't have to sweat about it too much. Okay, there we go. Let's do this one. So again, I'm starting light with a light, thin layer of moisture covering the butterfly area. And we can always add more color in if we want. It's always good to start light with watercolor because it's hard to take that color back once you've dropped it in. And I'm just really playing around. I'm going to kind of fuss with this one. And you can really play around with those shapes and those colors as long as it's still wet. So I'm just taking a moment to drop a little bit more color, and you can always come back to it a little bit. So fun. Ooh, I love how this is turning out. Okay. So let's go ahead and fill in this big one. I'm going to leave some of these white. I don't quite remember exactly which ones are white and which ones aren't, but I definitely know the ones around the edges are. I always say that I'm much better at painting the things than I am at knowing the botanical, specifics of all these beautiful plants and animals. Okay. So I've added a little bit up in here, but it's mostly water, so it's staying pretty light. I might do just a little bit of coverage of some of these little dots, just so we have a little flavor. All right, bring some nice warm rich colors in here, kind of in this lower wing. And this darker color is going to redistribute itself in this wet area. Notice how it's staying in the lines. It's not going outside of the lines. And I love doing wet and wet in this stage, in this first layer, because it just kind of goes where it wants. And I think it's just a really beautiful connection between the water and the paint and just letting go a little bit, A little bit of yellow up here. Botanists, don't come at me. I'm sorry if it's not exactly what a water butterfly looks like, but it's making me happy. And, this painting is for you. So if you want to make it blue or whatever, go for it. I'm really loving how that's turning out. And I do still want to add in a little bit of this quinacridone pink just to give it a little bit more depth. And because I'm adding this wet and wet, it's actually going to mix in with the paint that's already on the page. So it's not coming in hot with the pink. We're able to kind of blend and mix that color there on the page. Here you can see how this part has dried and then there's wet pieces around it that are creating those little dry lines. That's called a bloom. And that happened by accident. I didn't mean to do that, but I love this detail here. That's probably going to be one of my favorite parts of this painting when it's all said and done, just because I love to see how the water and the paint and the paper all play together. So that is, if you get some dry lines and it's not what you were expecting, that's okay. Don't worry about it. It's all part of the process. These are probably dry. I just want to add just a little pop of color here. Okay. I'm a fusser. I can't just leave it. And you might notice this is a little bit darker than this, but it may dry to a similar color. When watercolor dries, it lightens up. So if you decide, oh, you know what, I wanted this a little bit darker here and there, you can totally go back in and add more. Okay, so let's do this little cutie once again, going in with that light orangey peachy color. I'm just going to add a little bit over by the wings. This one isn't the main event here. Might wait for it to dry a little bit more to add a little bit more detail. One thing I really was excited about when creating these designs is that we can really focus in on the paint and the water playing together by having these outlines and filling it in and allowing the paint to play on the page. We can really just focus in right in on the painting, and I mean, let's be honest, that's my favorite part. I'm gonna add in a little bit of yellow here, just on these wings. And remember, as long as it's still wet, you can keep fussing with it. Once it dries, you can always add another layer on over it, but it's not gonna have that wet and wet blendy blend feel. Okay. Oh, how pretty is this? I'm so excited. Okay. I'm just kind of doing a little zigzag Z across my page, making my way through, mostly so I don't put my hand in things I've already just painted. I might go over some of these dots just with plain water, and that is going to allow some of the wet and wet to bleed into those dots, which I'm here for it. Okay, so cute. And get some of that Windsor red here. I am going to brush that out. I'm using just the lightest little touch, almost as if you were imagining just, you know, like little butterfly kisses, that gentle. And you bat your eyelashes against somebody's cheek, a little butterfly kiss. That's how gentle these little tap, 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 tap. And for the smaller butterflies, if you want to get more granular and you'd like to use your smaller paintbrushes, by all means, please do. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I just always end up using the big paintbrush and just bulldozing through sometimes on this first layer. I heard once, you know, start with the big paintbrushes and then work your way smaller and smaller. I kind of like that. Flows with my philosophy as well of I like to get a layer of color on and then I can really go in and fuss with the details. Can we just talk about how obsessed I am with this? Ah! It's so good. I'm so excited. It's okay to be cocky about your paintings. You should be proud of them. All right. If you can't be proud of your paintings, you know, why do it? Getting out there, you're doing it. Here you are, making time for you, making time for art, making time to appreciate the beauty of this world. That's something to be proud of. Painting has such relaxing properties. I think especially with watercolor. I mean, think of all the people who go to the beach or, you know, look at the stream to relax and find inspiration. There's something about water that just really connects us with the tranquility and the quiet and peacefulness. And so watercolor allows us to do that and create beautiful art. So boom, boom, bang, 2-for-1 special. I'm loving this quinacridone pink and mixing it in the wet and wet. We can always mix colors on our palette like how we did for that orange, but I just really love the brightness and vibrance that this brings mixed directly in. I like how some of it doesn't totally mix in, and that's okay. I like how it just kind of does its thing. And yeah, I know it's not exactly the right colors, but this is your rodeo, so you just paint it however you want. The botany police aren't coming for you. Okay, that's so cute. I'm excited. All right, let's see. We've got some more butterflies. Just kind of zagging my way around here. One thing that I think is really fun if you're painting things that move like butterflies, I'm not doing it for this one, but sometimes I like to paint out of the lines where the movement of the wing might go in this first layer and have that kind of wispy, flowy, wet and wet extend past the outline or the shape that I'm actually painting, and it gives this feeling of movement, and that can be really fun to incorporate into items that are, or subjects that are moving around on the page. But right now I just, I kind of feel like painting in the lines, so let's do it. All right, you can even go into some of these with just water. So I'm going to do that here and show you what that might look like. Sometimes it's kind of hard to see where the water is, but if you tilt your head, you might be able to see where it might be shiny, and that'll show you where your water is. Or you can slightly tint your water. Like this is just a little bit yellow, since my water's a little bit yellow. And you can just go ahead and drop in color wherever you want. So this is another fun way that you can add color into your paintings too. You don't have to just paint with paint. You can paint with water first and then drop the color where you want. And we'll definitely be doing that in our, when we get to those hummingbirds too. That will be really fun. I love to use that technique, especially with fur and feathers, like those fuzzy textures. Oh my gosh, so cute. So cute. I almost don't even feel like we need to paint the flowers. This is so fun. We will paint the flowers, but we'll just take a moment. And I got outside of the line a little bit here. You can always take the little tiny piece of paper towel. I roll it up like, I could take a little pencil and soak it up with my paper towel. Or you can leave it, you know, it's okay. Mistakes are okay, they're allowed, they're encouraged. That's how we learn. Okay, do a little bit of Windsor red in here. And so the wetter, like if you have your water kind of piling up on your shapes, it's kind of, you could wiggle it and it would wiggle around like Jello. That might be a little bit too much. Like if the paint is just going everywhere, you might have a little bit too much water in your shapes. So try just soaking up some of the excess water, and then when you drop that color in, when it's just a nice thin layer, like imagine like a Zamboni'd ice rink where it's definitely wet, but it's such a thin layer, it's not piling up on top of the page. That is going to be where you're going to get the most control over the paint spreading and having it go where you intended it to go. And same goes for when you're putting water and paint onto your shape. If you get a really big watery blob, it's going to cascade outward. Whereas if you get it where it has paint on it, but it's not super wet, you could even touch it to your towel and then drop it in. And that's gonna make sure that the water is redistributing with the paint in a more even keeled way. I think this is still a little bit wet. I'm gonna go in here just a little bit. So it's still a little wet. And I might come back to these and add some more as they dry. I might add a little bit more definition, but I'm gonna wait and see how I'm feeling about this painting as we go. So we have lots of fun, I'm trying to remember what I did. So we've got some really fun flowers in here. We've got some poppies. So just a bunch of wildflowers. And then these are some little daisy kind of cone flowery type things. So for the poppies, I'm gonna go Winsor red. I'm gonna do red and some just straight up permanent orange to get that wild poppy feel. Actually might add just a bit of this transparent orange here. So this red does have a little bit of, the Winsor red is slightly cool. And I want to keep this really nice and warm. So I'm just mixing up a nice poppy color. I have a little bit of the transparent yellow. I have a little bit of the permanent orange. And I feel like that's really nice. So once again, I'm going to cover the entire shape of the poppy with a light layer, and then I'm going to drop color in, and we will add definition between the petals later on as we go into our second layer. So let's go ahead and, okay, so this is actually a little bit darker than I want to go, so I'm going to go ahead and just go for my water cup and use my water to spread that color around. So I started with a little bit of paint. Oh, wait, make sure you don't put your hand in your butterflies. Started with a little bit of paint, and then I'm using water to spread it over the rest of the shape. Feel free, don't be shy to move your painting around so that you can get a better angle. You can get your smaller brushes if you'd like to get into these little crannies. And I think I'm actually going to add in just some water here to lighten up some of these upper petals. And when you add just water, it pushes the paint away and gives you more of a view of that paper. So I am using my towel to dry off my paintbrush, and then I'm coaxing that water in. I'm going to add a little bit of Winsor red here to the bottom. It's going to be where it's getting the least amount of sun. And I am just tickling that paint around, really gentle butterfly kisses. And we're going to let the wet and wet take hold. I'm kind of getting in some of those little crannies. And yeah, just blop a little bit in here, because I know it's gonna dry lighter. Like, I really like how it looks like right now, but I know it's gonna dry lighter, so I'm adding in just a little bit more color. But if you're still not totally sure where you want it to go, you know, start light. You can always add a second layer. Okay, so right now I'm hunting around my page to find more poppies that aren't connected to areas that are still wet on my paper. So here's one. Here's one. That doesn't really look like a poppy to me, but I'm probably, yeah, so this and this don't really look like a poppy. You're like, Kate, you drew this. I'm like, I know. All right, so let's do this one. That one's not touching anything. So again, I'm going in light. I think I want a little bit of orange to this one. So I'm adding in some of that permanent orange. good old Daniel Smith. And I'm filling in the whole shape with this light color. And then I'm going to use my lifting technique. So I've dried off my brush, and just like adding water, lifting the paint up will also lighten that area. So I'm thinking about where the sun will hit. That's in the top, those top petals. It's going to be a little bit darker at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in a little bit more color here at the bottom. I'm going in hard with that orange because I really like that color. We'll actually get some cool blooms in here as the paint dries because we really took away a lot of the moisture here when we were doing the lifting technique, and then I just added a lot of moisture to this bottom. So I think as this water pushes into this area here, we're going to get a nice bloom. Blooms happen when a dry area meets a wet area, and that dry line is where we get that cool effect. Okay, so let's do this one's still wet, so I'm going to wait on that. I think I would like to do these cone flowers. That are just popping open. I'm going to do my quinacridone pink, and I think I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think I want a bit of this phthalo turquoise just to make it a little bit, tone it down a little bit. So when you have a color like this, quinacridone pink is very, very bright. And if you want to tone a color down a little bit, you can take an opposite color. So this turquoise is perfect. You could see it almost turned it purple at first. So I might add also just a touch of this Winsor red, just to kind of bring it back into the palette of colors that we're using here. And I love that color. So I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of lighten that up a little bit because we always go in light. Just dried off some of that excess color, and I'm gonna try to leave a little yellow stamen part plain, no paint. Just that little dot right there. So it'll look nice and yellow when I add in that second layer. I would totally use a smaller brush for this one. But again, I'm just barreling through because I'm stubborn. Okay, here we go. When I'm filming these, I always try really hard to keep my head away from the painting so you don't see it. I love to get really up close, and my head will practically be on the painting for these tiny details. So I don't know, what a chiropractor would say about that, but it's what I do. Okay, so here we have a nice light covering. This is pretty dry as I apply it. I might add in just a little drop here and there just to deepen some of the colors and add some variation, but I don't really want these flowers to be the star of the show. So I'm not doing anything too fancy with these cuties. Okay, I might go in here. Once again, I'm starting out a little bit darker than I was prepared for. Oh, watch my hand, turn it sideways. So I'm just going in with water and spreading that paint out. If you're finding that the paint isn't spreading when you add the water, you might be going in a little too dry. Make sure your paint petals are still really nice and juicy and swirly. That is going to give you that smooth application of paint onto your page. If it's too dry, like here, this is too dry. You see, I can run my finger over it. It doesn't move. You would just need to add a couple drops of water and swirl it around with your paintbrush, and it should be ready to go. So once it dries out, it's not like forever gone. They're all good. I think I'm gonna do this one, that pink as well, and then I might get into some other colors with this too. Okay, starting light. Added in a little bit of this orange that was over here, just for a little variety. I can't see the yellow middle here, so I'm just painting with a reckless abandon. Oh, I like that. Okay, I'm actually gonna add in just like a little bit of red to the bottom because I don't want them all to look the same. And I like these background flowers just being kind of simple so we can really focus in on the butterflies. Kind of doing them a little bit like darker, a little bit cooler than our butterflies here so that the flowers are just the background and our colors really pop. So I might do some red here, just a little bit of our deep orange color that we mixed up. We'll get into this one, and once again, I'm gonna just put a little paint on here, and then I'm gonna kind of stretch it out, drag it out with mostly just water. I like this technique too because it makes it more concentrated around where I put the paint first, and then I can kind of fade that color out with the water. Watercolor, the more water you add, the lighter it's gonna get. The more paint you add, the darker it's gonna get. So by just adding water, it creates this nice kind of blending ombre effect here. Ooh la la. Okay. Great. I just drop a little bit down here because this is kind of underneath those other petals. Add a little bit of depth. And because I'm feeling wild, I'm just going to add a drop of water right here. Woo! Let's just see what happens, you know? Why not? I did a little one there too, just because, you know, live large, right? Let's see. I just want to make sure. I think we can get into that one. I'm going to do our nice poppy color with maybe a little bit more red here. Okay. I'm getting a pretty dry brush here to push that paint around. This is probably going to be darker than I wanted it to be, and that's okay. I'm going to use the lifting technique to lighten it up. And that's when I use my brush like a little sponge. Once again, this would be an ideal time for a smaller brush here. Let's do that. There we go. Actually, that's not too bad. So I'm just adding a little bit of water to the ends. Just picking it up a little bit. There we go. And there's a little bit that kind of went over the edge. I'll try to tidy it up, but it might not come. I think it looks a little too dry, but we'll try. Beam up a little bit. That's okay. All right, let's do that same color in here. I like what's happening here. Glad I switched to the smaller brush. Okay. All right, let's add just a little bit. Add a little more paint. Usually when buds are budding, they're going to be a little bit darker than when they're unfurled, because all those layers tightly wrapped, they're not letting in as much of that sunlight, lightening the petals. So they're going to appear a lot darker. I think I'm going to do an orange one here. So we're going to wait and see. This feels dry to me. There are a couple ways you can tell if something's dry. You can look at it and see if it's shiny. If it's still shiny, it's still wet. If you hover your finger and you feel like a cool little whisper of a fairy, it's still wet. And if you still can't tell and you just touch it and it feels cool, it's still wet. But this feels good to moi. So I'm going to go ahead and add in this orange. Kind of went straight into that permanent orange there. I like how it brings the orange from over there in. If you get it a little bit on your butterfly, that's okay. If you start painting and you realize your butterfly isn't dry and it starts leaking onto your flower, that's okay. No big deal. It's just one of those magical oopsie daisy opportunities that we get in watercolor. Okay, once again, I'm gonna add in, just drop in a little bit of color here. Ooh, that's fun. Yeah, I'm just gonna let that go. Woo! Okay, I think we've got one more of the cone flowers here. I think I'll do another orange. Let's do one of the red cone flowers, just a little more red. Once again, I'm leaving the yellow out, but if you accidentally paint over it, that's also fine. No worries. Okay. And let's do a nice reddy orange. Yeah. And this one is bigger, so I'm going to use my bigger brush. This butterfly is still a little wet, but I'm impatient and I'm okay with that. If you know me, you know I don't like waiting. I'm too excited. Ooh, and I love these big open shapes. Painting them in and just seeing how the color interplays. I like, as I'm painting, to grab paint from different parts of my palette, so I'm kind of connecting different colors. Did you see how that red just, ooh baby, it's gorgeous. Allowing that wet and wet to happen, really leaning into the watercolor techniques here. Yummy. I'm just gonna go ahead and do just a little bit of water up here. I kind of want it to get a little bit darker, a little bit cooler under where the butterfly is, because it might be casting a little shadow if we're feeling fancy. Okay, looks like it's dry enough. It's not going to bleed too much. Okay. And I am going to just kind of add some water up here and soak up a little bit of that pigment, just to give it some light and dark variance. This is a really subtle thing that you can do. I like to do it when I'm doing washes. A wash is basically where you're covering a large area in watercolor. And I like to, especially with nature things, I like to just add a little variety, because these petals don't all look the same, right? This is abstract. We're not going into every single tiny detail of these petals, but we can still add that variation in there in just a single wash, just by adding a little water or dropping in a little different color there. So I'm going to take a pause. I'm gonna let some of these dry because I know if I try to paint these, I'm gonna run my hand through everything. So if you'd like to take a pause too, now would be a great time. If not, I'll meet you back here in literally just a second for you and a few moments for me. Okay, we are back, and after a quick call with my mother-in-law, we're gonna go with wild roses for this. And so I am going to do a water layer to start. So we kind of talked about it when we were doing this butterfly, but I'm going to just paint with water. If it's really hard for you to see, you can add just ever so slightly a bit of color in here. So I added just a touch of orange, mostly so you guys can see it. I'm gonna go with like this really soft orange here, and I might add in a little bit of yellow just around the inner petals, and I want the outsides to still feel really light and airy. So I have painted the whole petal for this. Oh, this is a sneaky petal. There we go. And I'm gonna get some of my transparent yellow. And this is really, really bright. I just wanna see what happens if I add just the teeniest touch of my phthalo turquoise to this yellow. I think it's gonna cool it down just ever so slightly. There we go, perfect. There we go. And I'm going to just kind of go in at the base of where the petals are, just add in a little bit of that yellow. I really want this to remain delicate and peachy, because I want the butterflies to really be the star of the show. Okay, let's see here. Next we will do the other one. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Almost ready. I had to put my phone on silent there. Okay. So let's go ahead and dig into this one too. I might start this one with my yellow, just for a little variety. All right, I'm just gonna go right in to our transparent yellow, just drop in a little bit here and there. Keep it nice and light and soft. Those pastel-y colors come from just adding a lot of water. As this is drying, I'm actually kind of wanting just a little bit more of this orange color here. So while it's still wet, just drop in a little pizzazz. All right, love it. And then let's do this one. I think again, I'm gonna just do like that really light yellow. I think that's gonna look nice with all the colors there. So a little bit of yellow. A lot of water. Making sure this one is dry so that we don't bump into it. Because if we were to paint this while this was still wet, when these colors touch, it would bleed the red and yellow together. And if that happens, that's okay. That's always when it looks the most exciting. Oh, my little paper towel. Okay. Just adding in a little bit of water there, and then just the slightest bit of this little creamsicle orange color, just for a little bit of flavor. All right, I love that. Do you see this little bloom happening over here? Loving it. All right, now I can go back into my little cone flowers here, my transparent yellow. I'm just gonna do my boop right there in the center. Boop, 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 boop. And there we go. Love it. Oh, I missed one. And now we are ready to start thinking about our greens. So we have this sap green from Daniel Smith, which I love, 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 love. And we can go straight into that, but I like to mix up just a little bit of variety so all our stems don't look exactly the same. So here I'm just gonna make kind of a green smorgasbord. So I've got my transparent yellow, so I've got a little mixture of that sap green and that transparent yellow. I'm gonna add just a little bit of that phthalo turquoise over here. And that way when we're painting, we have lots of options when it comes to colors. You can even do just like a little bit of that quinacridone pink to chill it out a little bit. And as we are finding our colors, we're going to use our teeny tiny brush. Just make sure that the top of your flower is dry, unless you want that green to blend into it, which can be a very cool effect. But if you don't want that to happen, then make sure it's dry. Whoopsie. And remember, for these tiny stems, just imagine you're like a little ballerina on point. So really light touch with just the tip of your brush here. My stems are pretty light. Again, I really want the butterflies to be the star of the show. Oh my gosh, hold on a moment. Dropping brushes like crazy. All right, do some lighter stems here. Make sure you're watching out for areas that might still be wet so you don't smear your hand. You know, I'm the queen of getting it all pretty and then smearing it up last minute, so don't be a Kate. Just trying to add in some of my little green varieties, so again, we're not totally matchy-matchy here. Darkening this one just a little bit with a second layer. I want some of these ones that are a little bit closer forward to be a little bit deeper, a little bit darker. So I'm grabbing just a little bit more color, trying to find ones that are not connected to pieces I just painted recently, so I don't have that bleed. I just painted that one, so that one's probably still wet. I think this might be dry. probably okay. This one's all good. Let's see. If you want to kind of adjust the colors as you go, that's totally okay. You don't have to just use the ones that you did before you started. I like adding the pink because it makes it look just not so neon, just kind of brings it back into the earthly realm, if you will. Let's see. This might bleed a little bit, and I'm gonna play that game. It's like we might have made it in the clear. We'll see. Okay. Lovely. Oh my goodness. The dropsies over here. All right. Oh golly. Just want this to be just a little bit darker. Oh, there we go. There we are. Got a second layer to this one. Since it's so up close, I find that sometimes adding a second layer of the same color to a painting helps deepen that color and add emphasis. So I like to add second layers often to add depth. My first layer is always the big wash, just get some colors on the page. The next layer is to add depth by adding a glaze, which is when you paint one layer over your watercolor painting once it has already dried. So you have 2 or more layers on your painting. And I love, 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 love that technique. It's probably my favorite. Just to add a little emphasis. Some of these are dry. I'm just adding a little pop to a few of them. Might do some to this leaf just to get a little oomph. We'll look around at our flowers and see if any of those need any oomph too. All right, I like this. Okay, so we have some poppy centers here, and you'll see we don't have black. So we're gonna make a deep color using these awesome pigments. So I'm gonna use my quinacridone pink and a little of this phthalo turquoise. We're gonna get a deep bluish purple. Just super fun. And then I'm gonna add just a little bit of orange in here. Let's see where that takes us. We're getting into our colors. I like that. Now I'm gonna add a little sap green. We're getting closer. Okay, going a little bit more of this. And this color will be nice to have just throughout the paintings, to have a little bit of a dark accent I don't like using just black in my paintings. I like to mix my own blacks using whatever limited palette colors I'm going to use. This one's actually a little bit more in the brown territory, and I'm okay with that because I don't want it to be a stark black like the butterflies. I want it to be a little bit more subtle. So I have a nice brown here. Mix a little bit more off to the side. Yes, exactly. Okay, here we go. And then just a little bit here. And then we've got a little bit here. Beautiful. And if you want, you can even take your tiniest brush and just add some little da. Since poppies have those fun little pom-pom. Looks kind of like an anemone too. Just a little texture. Try to move your brush around so that it doesn't look all like the same direction and shape. Okay, now we can start into the glaze. So when we're doing our glaze, we can actually go into these butterflies and add a little more emphasis if we would like. This is our star butterfly. So I'm going to actually be digging into that one to give it a little bit more depth, a little more pizzazz. I want some of that rich orange to really shine through, but the tricky thing is we don't want to cover over the layer we've already created. So a really light second coat on some of these little wing details is going to really make everything pop. And I'm not even going to do it to every single one because then it wouldn't have the same effect. I'm going to just pick a few here and there. I feel like could use a little bit more orange. And this is really light because we don't want to cover up all the cool blooms and bleeds that we got earlier on. Do that one too. And here you can even do like a little bit there and then just even it out with yellow or with water. So it's really subtle. So I've added the color. Now I'm using water to spread it out over the whole area. And do you see how it just has a little bit more razzle dazzle? Oh, I love it. Okay, let's do that. Ooh, that was a little too dark. Let's do that with some of our yellows. And do it there and there. Might do it there too. Maybe just a subtle yellow there. Okay. And there's no rhyme or reason. If you want to look at a photo of a monarch butterfly, go for it. I am just doing what makes me happy right now. So I might go through my butterflies and just do a few of these. I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but it does make me very happy. So I am gonna glaze to my heart's content. If you're like, no, Kate, I don't want to mess it up or whatever. First of all, you're not gonna mess it up. You were painting and you were doing the thing, so you're doing it. But if you like it as is, you do not have to do this part. But if you're feeling fancy and brave, I encourage you to try it. And the lighter your layer is, the more subtle it will be and the more you'll be able to see through to the first layer that we painted. And I'm kind of mixing back and forth between that yellow and our orange. The The paints we're using here are all professional grade watercolor paints, and a lot of the ones I picked for this particular set, this particular kit, are more staining watercolors. And so yes, that means like be careful with your clothes and all that, but it also really means that the color is going to have just a really deep, beautiful resilience, and staining watercolors are my absolute favorite. It just really packs a punch, and I love it. So if you're wanting to get deeper into watercolor, go ahead and look at the tubes when you purchase them, and start to kind of dig into what the tubes are saying to learn the different properties of watercolor. Like if you find a color that you really like, look at the tube. Maybe you like ones that are more opaque, so you can't see through it as much. It performs more like a acrylic paint. It's not quite as transparent. Maybe you like that full coverage look, and that's really cool. I really like the transparent ones, but again, that's just my personal preference. Everybody has their own things that they like. So you do you, boo-boo. Red, just for some flavor. Oh, yummy. Okay, let's do just a smidge of this. And if it goes outside the lines or goes into more than one of the little wing shapes, that's totally fine. Just, you know, even if you cover over the whole butterfly and give it a second layer of wet and wet, that could be really fun too. Let's just take a moment to kind of look at these ones that we've given a second layer to compared to this one that we haven't. Do you see how it just has a little bit more depth, a little more iridescence almost? Again, this is still beautiful, but when we add that second layer, oh baby, that's where the magic happens. Okay, I like it. So now I am going to add just a little bit of some layering to these flower petals, just for a little bit of depth. Again, if you are not feeling it, totally fine. This is your journey, this is your rodeo. I'll talk you through how I'm choosing where to add the depth. And if you're like, I'm done, Kate, I'm done, then that's fine too. Okay. So I'm just going to start up here, and I am thinking about the petals. If my sun source is coming from the top, I'm just going to think about the petals that might be a little bit more shady, a little bit more covered. And I'm just going to add a little second layer. Nothing too fancy. And it doesn't have to be super dark to darken that layer. Just adding the second coat of paint is already going to give you more depth. Okay, so see, it's you know, it's not elaborate, but it does give it that little extra vibrancy. And you're not going to do every petal. Unless you want to, I mean, get in there, you know. I'm not going to stop you. I don't want to add too much detail to these background petals. just a little bit to give it some slight variation. Here I'm adding a little bit of an orange, even though we went a little pink on this flower initially. I like the thought of the sun coming down and hitting the butterfly's wings and glowing orange in there. Because why not? I do. And here I'm just adding a little pigment, and then I'm gonna even it out with my little butterfly kisses of my brush. So that's more of an all over flower second layer rather than individual petals. So you can really do either way or none at all. Now I'm getting into that mode where I'm in deep focus. Start to feel my heartbeat calming down. I start to really just connect with the water and the brush strokes. I find the second layer where I'm just finding spots to deepen, I get into this rhythm and this focus, and it is so peaceful to me to just kind of plod along through my painting, connecting and reassessing the different parts, thinking which pieces stick out as needing a little bit more attention. I tend to be a very chaotic and hyper person, and one thing I really love about painting is its ability to give me some semblance of peace and calm and a chance to relax my mind and really dig into that meditative state that I get into when I'm home, like really zoning in on the details of my paintings. And for you, it might be not the details, it might be more of the washes and the wet on wet stuff that gets you in the zone. You won't know until you start painting. Okay, so let's add, I'm just gonna add a couple little petals here, nothing too wild. Just to give it a little oomph. Going with my yellow, these under layers kind of giving a little bit of darkness. I don't really like what I did over here, so I'm just gonna spread it out. Add some water, lift up some of that orange. My lifting technique. Oop, dropped a little water. So if there's something that you're noticing you're not really jiving with, you're gonna want to make sure you blot it out before your paint dries, because once your paint dries, it's gonna become a lot trickier to lift that paint up. And when I teach workshops, this part of the paintings is usually when everybody gets really quiet and in the zone. I love it. All right, think we just have to add a little detail to this. Then we are good to go. So if these tips are helpful, at the bottom you'll see links to an intro to watercolor basics course where you get some of the words that I used. If some of these vocab words are new to you, it'll help introduce you to some of those concepts and walk you through the basic watercolor moves, everything you would need to really get started on your watercolor journey. If you're curious about more of the supplies that I like using, we've also linked my supply list and links to other kits if you're having fun with this. Hopefully you will join me for painting the other video or the other paintings in this kit. But if you're ready to fly with your own little butterfly wings, then fly, baby, fly. I have so enjoyed painting this. I hope you have too. I'm always spouting off all kinds of fun tips and tricks over on Instagram and TikTok and social media channels, and releasing longer form videos here on YouTube. So make sure you hit the follow so you can keep up to date on all your watercolor tidbits. Thank you so much for painting with me. It was an absolute treasure to paint with you. All right. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for the next one.